All good? First of all, can you hear me at the back? Thumbs up, cool. So before we begin, I understand this is the first post-lunch meeting. People might be feeling a bit sleepy. I did a north-east VMUG a few years back, and somebody in this session actually fell asleep. Okay, so I've got tennis balls, and I can throw. Right, so welcome. Prynawn da, I'm Welsh, so if I do go a little bit quicker than normal, shout again, throw something back, whichever you feel comfortable with. So about me, Gareth Lewis, I work for Xtravirt as a technical architect. We're a cloud consultancy and managed services provider. We've got a lovely stall at the back with swag, a nice swag bag full of awesome stuff. So again, feel free to speak to Stu, have a chat, see what we do, all that good stuff. So the main things on this slide, it's all very boring, but the main thing, 10 years of NSX, we're going to be speaking quite in detail about NSX today. Blogger of egarethlewis.com, so if you're interested in following, seeing some of the stuff that we're going to talk about today, then again, those articles, those blogs are online for you to see. So don't feel like you have to take pictures today. There's both links and QR codes at the very end, okay? So there we go. Ooh. Right, so agenda for this section then is V to T, NSX for vSphere, NSX data center for vSphere. We'll come on the naming conventions in a second. And more importantly, how you can transition to T. Okay, so just a quick show of hands. Is there anyone in the room that actually uses NSX today? Cool. Thank you, Xtravirt and VMware. Awesome. Right. However, if you're currently on NSX-V, we know it's now unsupported as of January last year. Maybe you want to come up and have a private discussion and we can talk about that offline. However, you may have your own customers who may come to you and we'll talk about the challenge of getting from V to T. So a quick recap in a second. We'll also be talking about the migration modes and options that we're given with NSX-T and specifically the migration coordinator. An introduction to what we call the user-defined topology. So that's a specific migration option which we'll be covering today. The workflow, what it looks like logically, and then we'll dive into an actual end-to-end migration itself. Now, I'm not brave enough ever to do a live demo, and I won't. So this is going to be screenshotted approach from end to end on how that can be achieved, okay? And again, if you want more detail, again, the full blog posts are available and we can have a chat afterwards. All good. So, a quick recap. Names, right? How many do we need? Okay, so we started with actually vCloud networking and security. That then was superseded by NSX data center for for vSphere, kind of known within the community as NSX-V. NSX-T came along after another acquisition again, NSX-T data center, and now NSX. So for this session, because we're talking about V to T, I'll keep referring to it as NSX-T, okay, just for simplicity. If I was to do a greenfield environment for a customer, then it would be NSX, but for today, it's T still. So, vSphere, NSX-based stuff, full integration with vSphere, brilliant. Lots of cool functionality, load balancing, VPN, NAT, all that good stuff. But as we know, the king is dead, unfortunately. Great product, end of life last January. Quite a few customers still on it today. I've been tasked with quite a few of those within Xtravirt, and again, it's about helping that journey from V to T and how we get there and what really that looks like. Okay. Now with T, obviously we've got enhanced functionality, a lot of which has been ported across from V, but of course, being the flagship product across the VMware stack of products. So again, if you look at vCloud Foundation or VMware Cloud Foundation, VMC on AWS, you know, all of those solutions are really driven, and that automation at scale, cloud functionality, all that good stuff is really driven by the network, right? So NSX is the cool hero product of today, certainly in my eyes, because I'm sad like that, but there we go. Okay, so migration options. Okay, so picture the scene. You're still on an unsupported platform. How do we get from NSX-V to NSX-T? Well, simply enough, right? If you've got the budget, if you've got the money, you can spin up a greenfield environment. You can install NSX, get to grips with it, understand how it works, skill up as a team, and then migrate your virtual machine workloads into that environment. That could be via something like HCX. It could be something like Layer 2 bridge, a VPN, all that good stuff, or a simple vMotion, depending on how that architecture of NSX-V has been put together. Today, though, is going to be more about an in-place migration, okay? An NSX-T comes with a tool called the Migration Coordinator, and it can migrate in various forms, okay? So today we're also going to be covering the end-to-end, complete from one site or one environment to another, okay? So there's two main modes really that the Migration Coordinator facilitates. One is called the fixed topology, and that's 5 sort of supported topologies that VMware will support. Again, click, 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 next, next, next. However, when we look at customer topologies, configurations of NSX-V, a lot of customers quickly sort of deviate from those 5 supported topologies, okay? So what do? Well, we can use what we call the user-defined topology option, and that is as the name states. So we can logically map NSX-V, maybe routing components, and we can map those directly across to the components in NSX-T world, okay? Now, the rest of this noisy slide are the other options, so I'll let you absorb those at your own leisure, but there are advanced migrations and, of course, integrations with things like vRealize automation as well. But for today, if my clicker works, there's this one here, user-defined topology, complete migration end-to-end, and we'll work through the workflow and the process together. So what can the Migration Coordinator do? So after we've deployed our NSX managers, okay, so into the same environment as NSX-V, in this scenario, they can coexist, but they won't kind of be connected at this point. We need to deploy our edges, so this sort of area here, okay, they will facilitate our services, north-south, load balancing, VPN, all that good stuff. So on the left, we've got an existing NSX-V topology. So in this example, we've maybe got ESGs up here or edge service gateways. This will do your physical peering to the physical fabric. And then below it, we could have distributed logical routers or another ESG, should we wish. So what we can do, we can port those across to the new environment, again, on the existing kit. Okay, so we're going like for like in-place migration. You can use the same hardware. And with this, we're moving those constructs from left to right. We can also consolidate some of those routing components as well, or constructs. Okay, so in this example, we've got an ESG. You'll notice that this one has changed from a DLR or ESG. We'll come on to that in a moment. So we can essentially consolidate those as long as your edges are sized accordingly. Okay, and then likewise the same, but down into tier 1 instead of tier 0. What I can't do is separate those functions. So we can't move an ESG and house it on a tier 0 and a tier 1. It's not how the technology works. And then also we can't move multiple ESGs in this example to a single tier 0. Okay. What does the workflow itself then look like for that end-to-end process? In simplicity, we've just got 5 steps. Okay. So we identify our prerequisites. We do our configuration because you're going to be asked for inputs, tunnel endpoint IP pools, what do you want to do about certain static routes, what is it that you actually want to move, all those good things. We migrate the configuration, and then once we're in a ready state to be able to actually fail over or cut over to our new edges and uninstall the NSX-V VIBs from our hosts and install NSX-T, then we're good and done. In reality, that we can expand that out slightly. Okay, so there's a number of checks within that process, and again, them themselves have their own sort of mini workflows. So this is the important bit here, really. There's the 4 key areas, okay? So we've got our translate configuration, resolve configuration, the configuration migration itself, and then there's automated checks, which will check that realization, okay? And at each stage, there's a layer 2, all right? And then there's a layer 3, layer 4, and layer 7 services area as well. Now, this is the important part. The migration coordinate can be run at any time, multiple times. Please do it, run it multiple times, because you will get an understanding and an idea of the inputs that you will be asked for and the inputs that will be required. So you notice we've got this rollback option, okay? So run the migration right up to the edges. Don't migrate the edges if you don't want to. Roll it back all the way. Document that process for your internal change requests, your change approvals, all good stuff, and validate that process to make sure that you're happy with it, okay? Run it again, okay? Should be exactly the same. Should, if it's not, something has changed in your NSX-V topology. But again, you kind of want to be putting in some sort of control maintenance windows. You know, this is going end of life. We want to kind of minimize the amount of changes that we're going to experience. So absolutely run it, roll it back, run it, roll it back, until you're happy and comfortable to do that. You'll notice that the edges, even though they can be migrated, so by saying we're going to migrate the edges, what we're doing there is migrating the north-south routing capability from NSX-V into NSX-T. And even that can be rolled back, okay? That's going to cause an outage, right? So if you're going to test that one, inform the business first, okay? Host migration, there is an article, there's an API call to actually roll a host back, but if you need to roll a host back, you're generally going to have a bit of a headache. You're going to be on a call with GSS, Global Support Services. Something hasn't quite worked, so that's why we demark that rollback process at that point. Thankfully, I've not had one of those, but of course I've said that, so my next engagement on this, it's all going to go wrong, okay? So that's the workflow. So how does it look in action? So before we get onto that, we obviously have prereqs, right? Like anything. So from vSphere right through to NSX, how should that look? Well, we obviously want our environments to all be healthy. Where the environment offers a backup, take one, okay? It's simple stuff, but again, all documented in VMware docs. We say now with NSX-T that obviously we're going from, if we use overlay networking, we can now integrate with the vSphere distributed switch. If so, then obviously we need to be VDS 7 or above, which in its own mind means that vSphere needs to be 7 or above. Again, small little things, so no distributed firewall, unpublished changes. And then on the right, so 3.2 or higher, ideally. If you want to go latest and greatest, cool. 3.2 is still fully supported. Our NSX management cluster needs to be deployed, or a single NSX manager, that's fine. You can opt to build out and expand that after the fact. But importantly there on the right-hand side is you do need to define your edge tunnel endpoint IP pool. And for anybody in the room that uses NSX-T, that's a new construct or a new terminology within NSX-T. Didn't exist in V prior. Importantly then, the bottom one. If you're going to do the user-defined topology, at one point within the migration process, you're going to need to deploy your routing components and routing constructs. So in our minds, in this scenario, in this session, it's going to be a T0 gateway and a Tier 1 gateway, and we're going to actually peer with a physical fabric via both BGP and OSPF. So a number of scenarios that we're going to cover in this session. So how does it look? This is NSX-V, all right? So we've got a couple of different constructs here. We've got the sort of northernmost edge services gateways. We've got two. One peers via BGP, another via OSPF, depending on what you use in-house. One has simply one logical switch attached to it, so an overlay logical switch, using VXLAN in this environment. And then on this ESG01, we've got a distributed logical router, which has two logical switches attached, okay? So it's going to look exactly the same, okay? However, the constructs have now changed. So instead of ESGs, we have tier 0s. Instead of DLRs, we have tier 1s. The segments, the logical switches are now called segments. So again, the terminology is changing as well. The one big thing to call out here is obviously where we've got these BGP uplinks, so 61.11, 61.13, they're different on the right-hand side because we're bringing up new neighbors and new uplinks. And that has to be done in preparation during that migration process. Before we start, any questions so far? Everyone happy? Mr. Cadwell?
I'm just interested if there's a kind of step 0 before this where you might use Bernie for doing some of this ARIA operations.
For networks, yeah.
A fiver in the jar there. Is that a useful kind of step 0 tool that you use, or do you,
could be.
Is this enough on its own?
Could be. So I suppose what would you be looking to identify there? Health, topologies, all that good stuff. I mean, this is
uncommitted changes, bottlenecks, hotspots.
The first thing we would do in any engagement with this is do a health check of that NSX-V environment anyway. Okay, so if there are any alarms, we want to kind of clear those. Our backups in place, we want to get those in place if they aren't. And any sort of errors or warnings we need to clear. There will be an element, as I say, design, right? So you need to understand your current topology. If you don't, document it. Okay, this is very basic. You could have several hundred ESGs, whatever the config max is. I don't remember, I look on config max. And likewise, you're going to need to map that over to the your defined topology. So this is where, yes, you're right, James, you could use a tool such as ARIA Operations for Networks, Vernie, or you document it, right? Make your design, because you're still going to have a design stage for this that will need to be approved, need to go through change, all that good stuff. But yes, use whatever tooling you're comfortable with to understand your topology. Answer? Yeah, cool. So the migration coordinator then itself, it's a service that runs on an NSX manager. Okay, so it doesn't run out of the box. You need to start that via a CLI call. We browse the system, browse to migrate, and again, we've got our options. Just out of shot on the bottom are the advanced modes, which we won't cover today, but we talked about things like vRealize automation and such. They're covered at the bottom there, or on the right rather, and the advanced operations on the bottom. So NSX for vSphere, we've chosen then user-defined topology. And as we work through the process, obviously, we're going to select our migration mode, which is complete. We can just absorb just the configuration if we wanted to. In this, we only want the end-to-end. So, of course, we need to authenticate because this needs to integrate with both vSphere and NSX for vSphere. So there's our two sets of credentials there. And then lastly, we're ready to import that configuration. Okay, so say you were to do a complete, or rather not a complete end-to-end, but run the migration coordinator up to the edges. You can roll back all of this way to this stage so that as you continue to do your BAU, your day-to-day management and configuration of NSX for vSphere, then you can keep making your changes, which you're going to do until you're ready for that cutover date. Then you do a fresh import of that configuration from both vCenter and NSX for vSphere. So once that's been onboarded, then we get into those four pieces of lifecycle checks that I mentioned. So translate, resolve, migrate, and then check. Okay. So the resolve part, okay, as I said, you're going to be asked for input. You're going to need to tell it what to do. So we've got a couple of things here. So we mentioned edge TEP, okay, edge tunnel endpoints. Traffic is going to need to be Geneve encapsulated. That will need to flow through your infrastructure from your hosts to your edges and northbound. That's via our Geneve tunnels in NSX-T. So for that, we need to define a VLAN ID for that. You'll have carved that out as part of the design phase, okay? So again, run this so that you know what you're going to be asked for. Another one there, manage or skip VLAN distributed virtual port groups, okay? So you might not want to bring those across. You might have a vSAN port group, might not want to bring that across. A management port group, you might not want to sit that within NSX. You might want to leave that within the vSphere realm, but you will be asked if that's what you want to do. Okay, so you'll work through each one. You'll either click next, or you'll input stuff, okay, such as a VLAN ID. When you're ready and you've submitted multiple times, so you'll notice on the top there, on the top right, you've got the submit option, so you can complete one, hit submit, and then work your way through it. And generally, based on some of those inputs, that will then kick in the brain of NSX to ask you a follow-on question, if you so wish to choose to do one of these. So once they're all done, yeah, we click continue. That then migrates that configuration in. We can see we've got a start option here. So what do? Once that's sort of migrated in, based on your inputs, we are then given the status of those objects, okay? So on the left here, we've got the NSX for vSphere object. So for example, a security profile, how does that translate into NSX-T? Well, that's now a segment security profile, okay? So you can start to see how those things map, and of course, on the right-hand side, the number of objects and a count on what you're actually moving across. Most importantly, there are checks and balances. All the due diligence and governance within the tool itself is handled automatically for you. If there are any problems with what you're trying to migrate, then again, you could get a warning here. And most importantly, here, you've got the rollback option. So if it does suggest that, whoa, you need to go back, change some configuration, or rather some config within your NSX-V environment isn't supported, then again, it will be identified at this point. So again, you can roll back, make those changes, and then proceed, come back to this step. Right. The next tab here is the define topology. So this is where we're actually going to map our NSX-V constructs into NSX-T speak, okay? But before we do that, cast your mind back to what I said earlier. At one point, we're going to need to configure stuff, okay? So in this example, this is our current NSX-V environment. So what we now need to do, at this point, all of the edges that I mentioned earlier that we've deployed manually, they've been added to the management plane of NSX-T. And what we now need to do is deploy our T0 gateways, our Tier 1 gateway, ready for the migration of services, okay? So what we've done here, essentially, you'll notice that the uplink IP addresses are slightly different. So we're going from 11 and 13 to 12 and 14. Nice and simple, okay? We make sure that, and we validate the BGP and OSPF is fully converged, and we make sure that we're distributing whatever it is we need to distribute. So it could be connected segments eventually, because what we don't want to do is move our logical switches over and then them not being realized or distributed northbound, okay? We want this to be as seamless as possible. So from a physical standpoint, how does that look? So on the top here, we've got one show BGP summary where we've got essentially two neighbors there, 11 and 12. You notice the second one there is currently active, so therefore not established. And then after we do our configuration, both are established, nice and easy, okay? And then OSPF, our second neighbor, is showing in the physical fabric.
Can I ask something on the previous slide? For the layer 2 logical switches, when do you need to manually create and matching segments in T?
Good question. Right, so we don't. So the routing components we do need to create. The brain then of NSX and the magic hot sauce under the lid, right? The routing components we need to bring up manually, and that gives us that flexibility. So you can design this however you want, right? So essentially, we could move these two into one edge cluster, okay? But we still got the routing components there. We need to do that manually. NSX Migration Coordinator will know via the imported configuration that specific logical switches are attached to either a DLR or an ESG, okay? And it will automatically create those for you.
With matching names, some
with exactly the same name.
Exactly the same.
Yeah. But what it will do at the very end, you won't, those segments won't be realized by the virtual machines until the host is upgraded, because the NSX-T hasn't been installed on those hosts. So once it's installed, I'll come on to that in a minute, workloads will move back onto that host via DRS, ideally, and they'll be housed on the new NSX-T segment as opposed to the logical switch or virtual wire. All right? Good question. So configuration's done. All right, so north-south is up. We are redistributing stuff into the physical world. There's nothing there to redistribute yet, but it's ready for that placement and onboarding of workloads. So on the left-hand side here, you notice we've got NSX ESG01, 02, DLR01. Those are the NSX-V constructs. And then on the right-hand side, from a drop-down box, now we can start to select our NSX-T components. So in this case, we're mapping like for like. All right, we keep things simple as possible. Go from like to like, ideally, because you want to get off an unsupported platform to a supported. So go like for like, and then you can make those enhancements and additional changes in the future. More importantly, we've got another option here. I'm not going to worry too much about do not migrate layer 3 to layer 7, because I've not done those yet, and I've not come across a use case for it. But we've got an option there to upload via a JSON file. So yeah, if you want to do that work ahead of time, again, we've said run the migration coordinator, learn how that looks, how that feels, and what you're going to be asked to do. Then again, you can pre-populate a JSON file with these things there. All right, so you might not have 3 items to map. You might have, 50, 100, whatever it might be. So you can pre-populate that JSON file in readiness for your change. Get that validated, get it peer-reviewed, all that good stuff. Okay, but we've selected our components, and then we're into layer 3. Okay, so if casting your mind back to the initial workflow, we do our layer 2. Now we're into layer 3, layer 4, layer 7. So how does that look? We import, translate it, and again, we're asked for more input, right? We're asked for more, what do you want to do? So one of my ESGs, for example, has a static root on it. Do I want to bring that over, or do I not? Okay, we've got the option to do that. Also, there's other things like role-based access control. So maybe I was integrated with Active Directory. Okay, that cannot come across, so you need to do that again. Likewise, backups. You'll be prompted to, you need to resolve these backups as well. Or do you want to import these users? Do you want to import the backup configuration? So again, it can do all that good stuff as well. Again, you'll work through, you'll submit. Okay, so you'll do your input, either click or input next. And again, once you're ready, you'll be prompted to continue. Likewise, the last part there, then we migrate that input into NSX via the migration coordinator. And once done, you'll see the objects, how they map. And then on the next stage, then we do that check realization, just to make sure, again, that everything is supported. There aren't any errors in your configuration or in an unsupported format. And we're healthy and we're successful. 2 more tabs to go. All right, so now we're into the realm of outage windows, okay? So again, you're gonna be wanting to be in a maintenance window. VMware recommend the migration of the edges and the hosts are done within the same maintenance window. You don't wanna leave it weeks or months between the two, all right? Get it done. Now, it might take a length of time. Edges will take 10 minutes, 20 minutes at max, because all we're doing is going from one configuration to another. The hosts take longer because we need to uninstall NSX-V and we need to reinstall NSX-T. All right? So how does that look? So we're at this point. During the migration of the edges then, ESGs are going to essentially be deactivated. Okay, so that peering is going to drop. All right, so all of these things, your customer, consumer applications are essentially going to go down from an external source. They're going to be unlinked, okay? And what essentially is going to happen under the hood is that NSX-T is going to connect to those logical switches. So your north-south has been moved over to NSX-T, but it's still going to be connected to logical switches or virtual wires within the NSX-V world until we get to the hosts. So this is what's going to happen. We've migrated edges, as I said, 10, 20 minutes certainly for this. And what do we see from a physical perspective? Well, we've got, 8 packet drops. It's not bad, right, really. So the edges are over. Okay, you've still got the option to migrate or roll back at this point, should something go awry or communication doesn't come back up. Maybe some configuration hasn't been met, or you're not redistributing routes into the physical fabric. From a physical world then, we want to be monitoring this, okay? So you want to check your physical fabric. You can see again from the top here, our BGP neighbors, both are up. After the migration event, then our first one, our NSX-V ESG, has become idle or inactive. Likewise, our OSPF neighbors, a bit quicker to converge there, has simply dropped out. And then lastly, importantly, check your routes, okay? So you can see the NSX ESG previous path was via .11, which is our ESG01, and then the new route, which has been learned, is now flowing via our T0 gateway. Brilliant. Host then is another story, okay? So this can take time, and this is where, again, 30, 40 minutes per host. If you want to be a little bit more stringent on time and a bit more careful, add in a bit of a buffer, say an hour a host, okay? You can do this as serial or parallel. If you go parallel, you can even let NSX work it out, so it will allow for the number of hosts, n plus 1 plus 2, so that it's not going to take down any of your infrastructure, okay? But again, be mindful of how you skin that.
How many reboots are needed?
No reboot. No reboot. Maintenance mode.
Remove the VIPs, install the new ones, after
Maintenance mode. So ideally, you want to be using DRS. You don't have to, but it does mean you're going to have to be pretty eyes on when one of these is waiting for maintenance mode, and it will tell you that.
Okay.
You can evac manually, yeah, but use DRS, right? Why would you not? But yeah, good. So yeah, important thing there, no reboot. So again, the time is a little quicker, but there's a lot of stuff to uninstall and then reinstall, and of course for NSX to do its own checks, right? You will be prompted in the current versions of NSX. Obviously, we're using VDS 7 or higher, so it will fail at an earlier point if you're not using VDS 7 or higher. So just double check that. A number of customers that I've worked with have upgraded to vSphere 7 to facilitate this migration. But of course, even upgrading to 7, you need to manually upgrade the VDS, okay? So it's still going to be on a version 6.x potentially. You need to manually do that, okay? So been kind of hit a couple of times with that one. Oh yeah, we need to get that done first. But again, it's a prereq, right? Called that out earlier. So we can click on a cluster and manually, or rather monitor the progress. So we've got ESX 1 and 2, a very small cluster, right? It is a lab, so give me that one. So yeah, we can monitor from here the progress, the percentage through, but ideally you're going to want a couple of tabs open in practice. Here we can see we're on the system and nodes page, and we can actually see what's happening. So it's starting after it's actually unprepared one of the NSX-V hosts, then it started to install and prepare NSX-T, okay? NSX. But yeah, so what you'll see, you can monitor from multiple dashboards, multiple views, and you can keep a close eye, close track on that. You want to get to this page, ideally, right? Success across the board. If you're not, we've got issues. The migration coordinator is going to tell you, okay? And it's going to give you some remediation actions as well. So you're not going to be left in the dark. It will give you a reason as to why something might have failed. And I do see failures. That's fine. But this is all about the prepare, plan, get those prereqs in place, and hopefully you won't. So, as I said, what has just happened? So this was previous post-edge migration. Then again, where literally as those VIBs are uninstalled from NSX-V, then NSX-T is installed, host comes out of maintenance mode, DRS eventually will move harder or workloads back on, and again, those are linked to the new overlay segments, okay, based on that imported configuration. Now, at that point, everything is advertised northbound, right? We're already coming in via the new NSX-T infrastructure, and again, that workload should be accessible, right? But again, you're going to want to have your own monitoring in place, whether it's as simple as an ICMP or ping to the virtual machines. Cool. Yeah, you're good to go. Any questions? Otherwise, we're going to be slightly ahead of time. Sure.
So, is there any roadmap towards minimizing or even eliminating the downtime you get with this migration? Like, say you have like dual backup path, so when you take out the fabric, the fabric again,
Right. So for the recording and the rest of the room, if it was a little quiet. So yeah, is there any roadmap to enhance the speed of failover, I suppose, or cutover, right?
Yeah, probably eliminate that.
I don't know about a roadmap, but let's go back to what it's trying to do, right? So if you're migrating a routing construct, then physical fabric needs to learn that change of path, right? So you're always going to be constrained slightly by the speed that routing protocol takes, right? BGP, OSPF may be a little quicker. As I said, that drop of 8 packets is pretty good in my eyes. If you can get it down to 0, cool, but you're going to be constrained by the physical fabric. The hosts, different story. We're always going to be constrained by the host downtime, but what we're not seeing, or what we shouldn't see, is downtime there of the workloads, all right? Because they're going to be evacuated to an NSX-V host. That host then is going to be magically upgraded, migrated, whatever. And it's only at the point of those virtual machines being moved back to the new NSX-T host, you shouldn't see a drop in vMotion, put it that way, right? So the only outage that you should see, and I will use should, right, is during the migration of the edges. And again, those 8 packets in that scenario is only because convergence time with the physical fabric. We can't really get around that, all right? Unless BGP itself changes. But, you know, there may be enhancements. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, we'll have another chat later then. So. Okay, yeah.
Me again.
Go for it.
When you reach that final screen, everything green and completed.
Yeah.
What happens then with your NSX manager, NSX-V manager?
Yeah. So, about to cover that. So you've still got to. So the question was, what happens at that point to your NSX-V managers, right? So let me just jump on to a couple of slides there.
No, getting on in order.
No, it's all good. So we're in the in summary, right? So prerequisites are key, all right? Understand what you need to migrate to. So that you're still going to need some sort of design, okay? Understand how that's going to be made up as a topology and how you're going to migrate from V to T, left to right, whatever we want to think of it as. Prepare your physical fabric ahead of time. Why not? Okay, so you know you're going to have new uplinks, new BGP neighbors. Get them in place ahead of time, right? Then you can just roll over and job done. Migrate the edges and the host in a single maintenance window. Again, that's the recommended approach. That's the supported recommended approach, so that's what we need to work to. That could be over a weekend. It could be multiple nights over a week, depending on when your outages are allowed. But again, you want that to proceed A to B to C rather than a period of time between. And as I said, run that migration coordinator as many times as you want up until the migrate edges and just roll it back, because then that will give you that idea as to the questions that you're going to be asked. So on to your question, Michael. Post-migration tasks. So these are well documented in VMware docs. So configure your backups, all right? You've made all of these cool changes. Get your configuration backups in place. And there is a good VMware docs guide on the uninstallation of NSX-V, because you'll obviously have to essentially deactivate the plugin from vSphere, fully documented. and fairly easy and quick as well. But by that point, all of your workloads are running within NSX-T, so you can kind of do these cleanup tasks at your leisure, really. Well, backups as soon as possible, right? But yeah, clean up NSX-V as soon as possible. So to close, next steps, links and QR codes. Feel free, take a look. I think the slide decks are going to be circulated anyway. If they're not, feel free to take these, or I can send it out. Feel free to drop me a line if you've got any questions about anything NSX related. If it's migration coordinator, then give us a shout. Or if you feel you need support and assistance through this in a formal setting, then again, reach out and we'll have those conversations. And again, we'll work with you to migrate along that journey, James. So, Gareth, have we got much left?
We've got a minute and a half. Good.
Minute and a half. So, yeah, question?
How does it work for cross-site?
Not supported currently. So you're going to have to break that link, and then essentially you believe you can run the migration coordinator a couple of times. There's a trick. That's going to be a beer talk, I think. We'll have a chat about that. That's quite I wouldn't say a unique scenario, because a lot of customers have used cross vCenter NSX in the past, NSX-V cross vCenter. But there are tricks and there are documents that we can provide to assist in that one.
So I think the procedure is to break the cross vCenter, to
cut it,
quote your primary to
and universal objects.
Then you migrate just the primary side.
Yeah. So there's a bit more hands-on.
You can't migrate any, what is the word?
Universal? Global, yeah. Universal in V, yeah. So you essentially need to convert to local objects and then think of it as a single site migration.
But the trick is if the other site's got DFW rules, they need to migrate as well.
Yes.
There is a workaround.
So again, think of it, you need to first do some work to prep that as a single site. So yeah, good question. Anything else? 45 seconds left. James?
I probably should have been asked to this. Is there any differences from your experience of going direct from V to T 4.x? Or is it the same as going to 3?
No, pretty much the same. So I think, remember, at some point NSX is going to drop the migration coordinator. Again, it's 16 months of NSX-V is out of support for 16 months, right? So it's going to get to a point where I think even VMware are going to say, okay, we've given you the time. Of course, you can still pay us large sums of money and we'll still migrate you somehow. But at some point, it's going to change. So the functionality hasn't changed all that much. It's still quite a simple left to right process. And we've still got those advanced options for the more niche migration scenarios. But yeah, still a great product. And it's matured really, really well, to be fair. Even in the earlier versions of NSX-T, when the migration coordinator was still quite sort of young, then again, there were some great developments made, and certainly in 3.x and 4.x, solid migration tool. But again, prepare and design where you can. Okay. Any other questions we can cover outside or over a beer? Okay, but thank you very much.